Hello, welcome to the ninth syntax seminar. This time we're going to be looking at particular types of predicates and the problems that they give rise to. Specifically, we'll be looking at the 1 and 3 place predicates. That is, the kind of predicates which either take one argument or the kinds of predicates that can take 3. First of all, let's have a look back and consider what X-bar theory has to say about the kinds of predicates that we can have. We know that X-bar theory has this basic structure. There's a head and then two positions within the phrase. The specifier position in front of the head and the complement position behind the head. For the time being, we're going to be ignoring the possibility of adjunction because we're basically interested in predicates and their arguments. And arguments either go in one of these two positions. They never go in an adjunct position because adjunct positions are for modifiers, not arguments. So we've got two positions within the phrase that we could find an argument in. Now, last week we argued that the subject element originates inside the verb phrase. So for a transitive verb, for example, we've got an agent in the specifier of the VP and the theme, the object, in the complement position. So a straightforward kind of verb phrase before anything moves would be something like this. In this case, because we've got an experiencer verb like love, it's the experiencer that goes into the specifier position and the theme in the complement position. That experiencer is obviously going to move out of that position into the subject position at some point, but this is the VP before anything moves. Okay, we can see, therefore, it's fairly easy to handle two-place predicates, transitive verbs, and you'd think it's fairly easy, therefore, to handle a one-place predicate. A one-place predicate would be an intransitive verb, like smile or arrive. Both of these are intransitive verbs. They just have a subject. However, it's been pointed out that these two verbs are actually different, and in fact, maybe there's no such thing as a single class of intransitive verb. Maybe what we have is two types of intransitive verb. One it's actually exemplified by smile, and the other one exemplified by arrive. One difference between these two verbs concerns the argument itself. With smile, we have an agent because smile is an action verb, and action verbs take agents. Arrive, on the other hand, isn't an action verb. It's what is called a change of state verb. With arrive, before you arrive, you're in one place, and then after you have arrived, you're in another. So you've changed your place, changed your state from being not here to being here. The thing that undergoes a change of state is obviously the theme, the thing that undergoes the process. So with arrive, we have a single argument, which is a theme. Okay, so clearly then, these two different types of verbs have different types of arguments. The terms that are used to refer to these verbs are probably unfamiliar to you, but I'll tell you what they are anyway. The kind of intransitive verb with an agent is often referred to as an unergative verb, whereas the type of intransitive with a theme is called an unaccusative verb. We don't need to go into why they're called that. That's just their names. Okay, now what difference does this actually make? Well, it turns out that these two verbs are actually quite different from each other in as much as they don't behave themselves in the same way in certain syntactic contexts. For example, with an unergative verb, a verb that has an agent, although they are intransitive verbs, you can actually give them some kind of an object. Okay, so with something like smile, the thing that you can smile is, of course, a smile. So you can say John smiled an evil smile. That kind of thing is called a cognate object. Cognate objects are objects which are so closely related to the verb that they are associated with that they actually look like the verbs themselves. So you smile a smile, you dance a dance, you die a death, or something like that. Sneeze a sneeze, yawn a yawn, etc., etc. So you can see then that these are special kinds of objects which appear with these particular type of intransitive verb. The observation is that the unaccusative verb can't take a cognate object, so you can't arrive an arrival. Okay, so John arrived, a timely arrival is ungrammatical. However, there are things that unaccusative verbs can do that unergative verbs can't. One of those is that, in English at least, we have a special kind of sentence known as a there sentence. Now, with a there sentence, what you get is the subject position is filled by this word there. This is one of those meaningless pleonastic subjects that fill the subject position. And the element, the theme, which normally would go into the subject position actually appears behind the verb. So you get there arrived a package. Only unaccusative verbs can appear in these kind of sentences, and the unergative verbs can't. You can't say, there smiled a woman. Okay, so clearly then, these two different types of intransitive verb behave differently to each other in these different contexts. Now, how do we explain that? Well, it's been proposed that the unergative verb with the agent has its argument in what is typically the agent position. That is the specifier of the VP. If you think of the transitive verb like hit or love or something like that, it's the agent or the experiencer which goes into that higher specifier position. Given that the unaccusative verb has a theme, it's been suggested that maybe the theme goes into its normal position. That is, the complement position. In a transitive verb, it's the theme which goes in the complement position. And then maybe the same is true with these single argument verbs with a theme. Okay. Now, of course, that gives us a different word order, but that's actually not going to make any difference because we know that something has to move to the subject position because this is a verb phrase we're looking at here, and the verb phrase is going to be part of a bigger structure, an IP, and we know that something has to move to the specifier of the IP. Obviously, if there's only one argument, it'll be that thing that has to move. So with an unergative verb like smile, the agent will move into the subject position and we'll get John smiled. With the unaccusative verb, where there isn't an agent, just a theme, well, obviously it's going to have to be the theme that moves. So that's going to move up into the specifier of the IP and end up in front of the verb. So you'll end up with both of these constructions looking the same, John smiled and John arrived, but the original position of these two arguments is different. Okay, so that's how we account for the difference between these two different types of intransitive verb. Now that seems fairly straightforward. However, there remain a number of problems. Particularly these problems are associated with the analysis of these unaccusative verbs. Remember last week we looked at these kinds of sentences involving a causative verb like to make. Essentially what we have here is that verb has its own agent. Okay, John is the one doing the making, the causer of the thing. And then these types of causative verbs take special VP kind of complements. These VPs have an internal an argument inside the VP. Now, given that this is one sentence, there's only one subject position, and the thing that moves to that subject position is, of course, going to be the causer. Okay, John here is going to be the subject of the whole clause. The agent of the lower verb, smile, therefore can stay put inside the VP, doesn't have to move. Okay, now, given our analysis of unergative verbs like smile with the agent in the specifier position, that seems to be fine because what we have here is the lower VP Mary smile. Mary is in the specifier position, the agent position. Smile is in the verb position. Nothing moves. That's fine. Now, if we have, however, rather than an unergative verb, but an unaccusative verb, and the theme starts off in the complement position before it moves to the subject, well, we would predict that in these kind of causative constructions, given that the argument of the lower verb phrase doesn't have to move anywhere, you would predict that it would appear in that complement position behind the verb, and you would get something like John made shut the door. But of course, that's not what you get. What you actually get is John made the door shut. And that looks as though that theme element is in the specifier position of the lower VP. And that would be fairly inexplicable as to why we should get that word order if the theme starts off in the complement position behind the verb. Another problem which arises with unaccusatives has to do with where we actually do find themes. Obviously, in a transitive verb like kick, the theme appears to want to be behind the verb, okay, in the complement position where we've assumed that's the position where we find themes. But with unaccusative verbs, given that you can actually fill the complement position with something else, like, for example, the verb to roll has a theme, the ball, which is the thing undergoing the rolling, and we can also have a path preposition phrase like down the hill. Okay, now there it looks as though the theme has to be in the specifier position. So we've actually got two different positions where we find themes. In a transitive verb, we've got the theme position in that lower complement position, and with the unaccusative, we've got the theme sitting up there in the specifier position. Now, that's worrying. That's problematic because we've been assuming that arguments sit in specific positions. That is, agents, after all, always sit in a specifier position. You never get an agent in a complement position. So why would the theme be different? Why would the theme be in one position with one type of verb and in another position with another type of verb? Okay, so again, there are problems here. The evidence that we've got there, particularly from that causative structure, would seem to suggest that the actual theme position really is this specifier position of the VP. Okay, that themes originate in front of verbs. The problem that leads us to, therefore, is that, well, what's the difference between the unaccusative verb with a theme and the unergative verb with an agent? If both of these start off in the specifier position, then we have no syntactic difference between these two constructions, and yet we've seen they behave themselves differently. Okay, so as you can see, we've still got some problems. We'll leave these problems for a moment and start looking at something else, and we'll return to them once we've discovered some new things about verb phrases. Okay, before we get on to that, however, we're going to start to look at another kind of verb. That is the kind of verb which have three arguments. Put is an example of this. Put has an agent, and then it has two arguments following the verb. One of them is the theme, as in the pan, and the other one is a location on the stove. Okay, so John put the pan on the stove. John is the agent, the pan is the theme being put, and on the stove represents the location where the pan ends up by being put there. Okay, now this isn't the only kind of three-place predicate that we can find. There are ones which actually have clauses as one of their arguments. So the verb to tell, for example, John, the agent, the one doing the telling. Mary here is the goal, the one who is getting told. And we also then have this clause, the thing that was told. It's like the theme. Okay, so John told Mary that Bill was late. John is the agent, Mary is the goal, and that Bill was late is the theme argument. Another kind of verb with three arguments is one that actually has two objects. This is known as a double object verb, and we have an indirect object represented here by Mary, which is interpreted as the goal, the one where the thing ends up with. If you give Mary something, she ends up with it. And then the thing that's actually given, which is the direct object. Okay, so John gave Mary the money, John is the agent, Mary is the goal, the money is the theme. Finally, we can also have kinds of three-place predicates where there are two prepositional arguments. Okay, so John spoke to Mary about the money, John is the agent, the one doing the speaking, Mary here is the goal, represented by this two preposition phrase, and then we've got about the money, which is, well, it's difficult to say exactly what it is. It might be a theme, who knows. Let's not worry about what we call these things, but you can see here we've got three arguments, a subject, and two prepositional phrases following the verb. Okay, well, obviously then it's perfectly possible to have verbs with three arguments. And that is actually a problem because, as we've seen, X-bar theory allows us to have two argument positions within any phrase. We've got the subject position, or the agent position, which is the specifier, and, well, we've got this other position, the complement, where we seem in a transitive verb to have the theme there. That's problematic in itself. But even bigger problem is, well, where do we stick the third argument? In this case, the preposition phrase on the shelf, there's just no position inside our verb phrase for it. So we've got a real problem here of how to fit a three-place predicate into structures which only allow two positions. Okay, so those are the problems that we're facing. We've got a three-place predicate with a position lacking, and then we've got these unaccusative verbs where we seem to want to put the theme into a specifier position, and themes also seem to want to go into complement positions. Okay. All right, well, on the way to the answer to those questions, we need to look at something else. Remember last week we were talking about these causative constructions, okay, with these causative verbs. They take VP complements. We've got here a fairly straightforward unaccusative verb, break. The window here is the thing undergoing the breaking. It's a change of state verb. The window before it broke is whole, and afterwards it's in pieces. It's changed its state. So here we've got typical theme argument. Okay, we can include that into it has this kind of structure where it seems as though the theme is in the specifier position, and as I say, we can include that into a causative construction with the causative verb make there, and that's what we have fairly straightforwardly. All we've done there is built another VP on top of that VP headed by the causative verb make. John is the argument of that causative verb, the one who is causing the window to break. So John is the causer or agent in this respect. The theme, the window, is inside the lower VP. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. But the thing about these kinds of verbs is that there's another way of saying virtually the same thing. Okay, so alongside John made the window break, we've also got John broke the window, which looks like a transitive verb. Okay, it's a verb that's got two arguments, a subject, an agent, and the window, the theme. But this means exactly the same thing as the causative construction. John made the window break. John broke the window means that John caused the window to break. Okay, so we have a causative meaning here. How can this have a causative meaning when there's no causative verb? I don't think we'd want to say that the verb break is different between this one and the first case, where we've just got a simple unaccusative. The window broke and John broke the window. It's the same verb. It involves the window breaking. The thing is, we've just got an extra causative argument and, note, also an extra causative meaning. In the window broke, there's no implication that there's a cause of that at all. Okay, no indication that there is somebody who is responsible for the window breaking. The window just breaks. Okay, but John broke the window. We've got now here a causer, the one who's causing it to happen, and a causative meaning. So where does all that come from? And how come it means the same thing as the kind of thing where we've got an actual causative verb? Well, one argument has been proposed is that these types of causative constructions, like John broke the window, actually do involve a causative verb, only that causative verb is abstract. It has exactly the same structure as the non-abstract causative verb make. That is, it's a verb heading its own VP, which takes a verb phrase as its complement and has an agent as its own argument. Okay. The difference between this and the make type verb then is that this causative verb is unpronounced. You don't actually see it, whereas the make is a pronounced verb and you can see it. Of course, that's not the only difference, because we've got a different word order. Okay, with make, the verb of the contentful verb phrase, that is the lower one, is at the end of the phrase, as you would expect. But with the other one, break doesn't appear in that position. It appears between the two arguments. One way that we could account for that is to say that this causative verb, the abstract one, the one that is unpronounced, is also different from the pronounced causative verb inasmuch as it is a bound morpheme. Now we know bound morphemes cause verbs to move. Tense, for example, sitting in the inflection position, causes the verb to move out of the verb phrase position, head position inside the VP, into the inflection position in order to support that bound morpheme. So if this causative verb is a bound morpheme, that's going to cause the verb to move up into that higher position and put it between these two arguments. And we're going to get John broke the window. Now, just to show you that this isn't a wild analysis, something very similar happens in other languages. Take, for example, Hungarian. Okay, consider this sentence. János gurította a labdát. Okay, John rolled the ball. Note, this is a causative sentence. Okay, we know it's causative for a number of reasons. One, we've got a causative interpretation here. John causes the ball to roll. Okay, we could have just said the ball rolled without having a causa, just like we've got here with John broke the window and the window broke. Okay, so János gurította a labdát is a causative construction. The other reason we know that this is causative is because there's actually a morpheme in this verb that is the causative morpheme. We can actually see it, and that's this eat morpheme. Eat is equivalent to the English make in this respect. This is John made the ball roll. Okay, now we know that Hungarian is a highly agglutinating language. That means that you can stick morphemes onto a single stem one after another. And if you look at the form of the verb here, then what we've got is a stem of the verb, which is actually gur, and then we've got the causative eat, then we've got the past tense ot, and then we've got the agreement with the third person singular subject, János, which is ta. Okay, now the analysis of this would be to say that each of those morphemes holds a special position in the sentence, independent of the verb, and that we get them all together via movement. So what we've got here is a verb phrase at the very bottom involving the thing which is undergoing the process. Here, the ball is the theme, and we've got the stem of the verb gur as the head of that verb phrase. Above that, we've got the causative phrase headed by the it. We've got the tense headed by the ot, and we've got the agreement headed by the to. János actually originates inside the causative phrase because János is the causer. But of course, he's going to move up into the subject position because, well, we need to fill the subject position even in Hungarian. Okay, so what we start off with then is a bunch of independent bound morphemes, but because they're bound morphemes, they can't stay like that. So what's going to have to happen is that first of all, the verb is going to move and stick itself onto the causative it, which is exactly what we're saying happens with English in John broke the window. We've got a causative verb in the higher position. It's a bound morpheme. It therefore needs to be supported by the verb, which can only do that by movement. Okay. The difference between English and Hungarian is that in English you actually pronounce that bound morpheme like eat, whereas in English it's unpronounced. Furthermore, then the verb, along with the it causative morpheme, is going to move further up to support the tense. So we're going to get guri dot. And then that whole thing is going to have to move up to support the agreement, and we're going to get guri dot da. Okay, so you can see then what we're proposing for English isn't way out at all because it does happen in other languages and visibly so. It's just English has this extra complication, as it were, for at least identifying the analysis that causative verb is unpronounced. Now, one positive thing about this analysis is that it gives us an extra position. If the theme is really sitting in that specifier position of the lower VP, well, we now open up the complement position inside that VP. So we've got a third position. Okay, we've got the agent position, which is in the specifier position of a higher VP. We've got a theme position, specifier of the lower VP, and then the complement position. And of course, that's exactly what we need in order to account for three-place predicates. So we could analyze a three-place predicate like put as involving an agent in the higher VP, a theme in the specifier of the lower VP, and the location in the complement position of the lower VP. Everything fits. Of course, that is not the right word order, so it's not John the book put on the shelf. And so what we're going to have to assume is that whatever that verb is in the higher verb phrase, that it is, first of all, abstract, unpronounced. You don't actually see anything there, but it's also a bound morpheme, which is going to cause the lower verb to move up into the right position in front of the theme. So we're going to get John put the book on the shelf. Okay, well, that might take a bit of swallowing because what on earth is this extra verb? Do we really have any evidence that such an extra verb really exists? It solves the problem, but is that enough? Well, let's have a look at another case to see if we can justify the existence of this extra verb. Let's take a transitive sentence, a simple transitive like John hit Bill. Okay, you'd think this is fairly straightforward. John is the one doing the hitting, Bill is the one getting hit. All you need there is a simple verb phrase with one verb in it. But consider this question. What does John actually do when he hits Bill? Okay, so we've got the sentence, the situation, John hit Bill. What's John actually doing? Well, one of the obvious things that comes to mind is that John makes a fist and throws the fist at Bill and makes contact with him. So John throws a punch. If that's true, then John hit Bill is true. Okay? But that's not the only thing that John could be doing for John hit Bill to be true. He might have thrown a stone, for example. And if the stone hits Bill, you could still say John hit Bill with a stone. Okay, so John hit Bill is still true, even though John isn't actually making physical contact with him. He might have fired a gun and hit Bill with the bullet. Okay, so in that case, John is even further removed. It wasn't John that threw the bullet. The bullet came from the gun. Just John was using the gun. But John hit Bill could still be true. He might have been driving a car. Okay, and Bill steps out into the road and unintentionally John runs over Bill. You could still say John hit Bill there. He might have been doing something as innocently as opening a door. And if Bill gets in the way and the door hits Bill, you could still say John hit Bill. Okay. As you can see then, there are an enormous number of things that John might be doing for John hit Bill to be true. And the sentence John hit Bill doesn't tell us which of those things is actually happening. In fact, John hit Bill is a very vague sentence in terms of how we interpret what John is actually doing. On the other hand, Bill has a very straightforward interpretation. In all of these situations, Bill is the one that gets hit. Okay, so it's clear that the theme here has a very stable meaning, but the agent has a very variable and vague meaning that isn't itself determined by the meaning of the verb. We have to determine the true meaning here, or the true interpretation of what it is that John's done in context by knowing what's actually happening. Therefore, what we could say is that really what this sentence means is something like this, something very vague as far as John is concerned. John does something, okay, and then Bill is the one that gets hit. But obviously there is a relationship between these things, that John doing something and Bill getting hit are related in as much as Bill getting hit is the result of whatever it is that John does. So it isn't that John does something and then by chance Bill ends up being hit with nothing to do with what John is doing. Okay, so we've got this kind of relationship. And note, that is very similar to what we get with a causative. With a causative in John made the window open, what we're saying is that John does something that causes the window to open. Now, it might be that what John does is goes to the window and actually opens it, turns the handle and pulls it, but it might be something else. He might open the door, and the door causes draft, which then causes the window to open. You can still say John made the window open there. So actually, these transitive verbs have a lot in common with those causative elements, and we've seen that with the causative constructions, you actually have two verbs. You've got the causative verb make and the actual verb inside the lower VP. So it wouldn't be too much of a leap of imagination to actually suggest that the analysis of a transitive verb is actually a two-part verb phrase, a higher verb phrase headed by this rather vague verb meaning to do something. Okay, and John, the agent here, is the one associated with this, what we might refer to as an agentive verb, something that just means he acts. Okay, so John acts, and then as a result of what it is that John is doing when he's acting, Bill is the one that gets hit. Okay, so that analysis seems fine. Again, note, however, though, obviously that's not how it's pronounced. You don't actually see this agentive abstract verb because it's an unpronounced abstract verb, for one thing. And the other thing is that that's not the position for the verb hit either. So we have to assume that this agentive verb is a bound morpheme like the unpronounced causative verb is, and that causes the verb, the main verb, to move up into that higher position in front of the theme. Note, the consequence of this is that we can assume that themes start off in a specifier position and they achieve their post-verbal position behind the verb, not because they were put there in the first place, but because the verb moves in front of it. Okay, so objects end up behind verbs, not because that's where they start off, but because the verb moves in front of the object, and the object really is in a specifier position of a lower VP. One advantage of this analysis is that it gives a really simple analysis of the passive. Passivization always involves a transitive verb. Okay, so you can only passivize transitive verbs in English, and as we've said, a transitive verb involves two VPs, one inside the other, one headed by the content verb, the lower one with the theme, and the higher one with the agent and this abstract agentive verb. Okay, with a passive, what happens is that you get rid of the agent. Now, what does that mean? Get rid of the agent. If we see a verb phrase like John hit Bill as being a single verb phrase, and we say, well, we just delete the agent, a lot of questions arise. Why is it the agent that gets deleted? Why not the theme? Why don't we ever have a kind of like a reverse passive? What happens in the passive? You get rid of the agent, leaving the theme behind as the only argument. That's the argument that has to become the subject, so we get the theme in the subject position with a passive. But why don't we ever delete the theme, opening up a space for the subject to move into the object, and therefore the agent becomes the object? You never get that. That's never a process. In any language, there is no such thing as a kind of reverse passive where the what would have been the subject comes out as the object. Okay, you only ever get those ones where the object becomes the subject. So clearly passive targets the agent. Why is that? Well, as I said, if we assume there's just a single verb phrase there, it's not really explicable why passive works as it does. But if we assume this new structure, where the agent is actually part of a separate verb phrase, it's fairly straightforward as to what's going on with a passive. All you do is get rid of that agentive verb. If you get rid of the agentive verb, you get rid of the agent, you get rid of that whole VP, and what you're left with is the lower VP, which of course contains the verb and the theme. Therefore, the theme is the only element there that could possibly be the subject. That has to move into the subject position, and we can immediately have a straightforward account of what the passive sentence is all about. Now, it also gives us a better analysis of this distinction between unaccusative and unergative verbs. Remember, we left the situation with those that we want to say that they both have exactly the same structure, but they behave differently. Okay, but from what we've actually said now, we can say that, well, themes do originate in specifier positions and agents do originate in specifier positions, but they are different specifier positions, and that's why these verbs are different from each other. With an unaccusative verb, given that you've got a theme and themes originate in the specifier position of the actual verb itself, then all you need is a simple VP for an unaccusative verb. You don't need an extra VP because there's no agent. On the other hand, unergative verbs, which do have an agent, must have this extra VP. In fact, that's the only VP that has an argument, the agent. There's no theme, so there's nothing in the lower VP apart from the verb. Okay, so as you can see then, the two types of intransitive verb have very different structures. A theme argument inside the lower VP without an agent. The unaccusative verb is a very simple VP, just one VP. The unergative verb with an agent but no theme is more complex. We've got two VPs, one with the agentive verb and one with the actual verb itself. Of course, the agentive verb is abstract. It's also a bound morpheme. That's going to cause that verb to move. But because there's no theme, you don't actually see anything moving there. This is what is known as a vacuous movement. Vacuous movements are movements that happen without changing any order. Okay, but still, the main point is that we have here different structures for these two different types of verbs, and that can help us to account for why they behave syntactically different. Okay, let's summarize what we've said then, this presentation. The first thing is that the theme always starts off in a specifier position of the content verb, which is in the lowest VP position that we get. Okay, there is a single position for themes, and that's it, the specifier position of that lower VP. Agents, on the other hand, start off in a different position. It's a specifier position, but a specifier position of another verb phrase, a higher one, which is headed by a specifically agentive type verb, or maybe a causative verb. Different position from the theme, but still a specifier position. This abstract verb that you get with the agents is obviously unpronounced, but it's also a bound morpheme, and that has two consequences. One consequence is that it's going to cause the verb of the lower VP to move in order to support it, because something has to support a bound morpheme. The other thing is, because the verb moves, the theme is going to end up behind the verb in what we've taken up until now to be the complement position, but it isn't a complement position. It's a specifier position of a lower verb phrase, and the verb is in front of that position precisely because the verb has moved to support the bound morpheme of the higher verb phrase. Okay, that's all I want to say for this week then. I'll see you in class. Bye.